Good afternoon, everyone. We start by convening the meeting of the State Board of Canvassers in order to certify the results of the general election. My name is Douglas Keller, and I'm co-chair.
Jim Walsh, Frederick Peterson,
Evelyn Phillip. Todd Valentine.
Paul Collins, Joe Burns,
Anna Savitzer,
Pat Campion,
John Conklin.
George Stanton.
Liz Hogan.
Bob Brown,
Terry Green, election operations.
Bob Warren, election operations.
Bob Brunsnack, Nysboe.
Amy Allo, League of Women Voters of New York State.
Okay, well, thank you. So before us, we have the certification. Are there any explanations of that to begin? And I don't think we have everything, right?
Yes. Do you want to do that, Anna?
the 100th Assembly District is not part of your certification. That is still being litigated, and the boards did seem to have some issues calculating blanks and voids and miscellaneous votes, so there will be some amendments forthcoming. We have, the 89th has been resolved, but that will be amended, but clearly the winner is designated in the numbers that you have before you. Was there anything beyond the 100? Was there a Senate seat? Senate. Seven. So that is not part of your certification today.
It's my understanding that as far as the seventh is concerned, we're under basically a court order not to certify.
Right.
Is that correct?
Right.
And the same with the 100.
Right.
Okay, so we will approve the I move that we approve the documents as presented to us for the operations. And, decide the certifications.
The first doesn't say when it's going to require. We do one at a time, or just pass them all over the place.
I would do
Well,
these couple first.
Let's start with.
This is Andrew Cuomo.
The last page of this has a signature for all of you. I'm not sure why we have two extras.
Now, how do we want to handle
Oh, they're all of them.
certification on the 7th and the 100th? I don't know if we want to come back, or
Here.
ultimately we're going to get a court order.
You signed it faster. The last page of all these, there's a spot.
They don't technically need certification in order to be seated.
That's true.
So,
We just present the
so we can
results
do it in
as ordered by the
January.
court.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just didn't have a chance to talk about it. Things have been changing.
Well, my
Day by
recommendation
day.
is that, we can notify the
The respective houses. of
the respective
results.
houses of the results, and we'll give them the certifications in January, and they don't need certifications in order to take seats in the legislature. because
It's
of
different than
Article
other
3,
things,
Section
right?
7 of the Constitution.
Mine we used to say, manually the problem.
Effectively, that's what we would be doing, is forward
This he
forward
needs.
results from the counties to the houses. I mean, you could actually have us vote for it. You could delegate it. It's up to you.
You can't delegate, sir. You can't delegate, sir, under the statute.
How about some of that?
That these are the results. That's what we would do. Yeah, I mean, we would send a letter with the results, from, it would come from Bob and I.
Yeah.
Once we get the court order and the results, here are the results.
We've given them the results and, follow up with the official certification later and some of the others.
The legislature often seats people before we certify, so I don't, and it's completely appropriate under the Constitution, so I don't see why we need to have a special meeting to certify two legislative seats. If it were for Congress or Senate or one of the statewide, like governor, we would need to do it.
I mean, if we had to do a special meeting only for this purpose, the question is, can we
locate that closer to the majority of you.
Paul, did you
And then
ever
just meet
check
to
on
do
whether or
that.
not, if you have a video hookup, are we allowed to meet by video
Yeah.
hookup?
As long as it's two-way, yeah.
You know, well, we have Skype now. and
Well, we have the video
It's not that
capability.
complicated or
No.
expensive to do
No,
it.
that isn't, Doug.
It's a lot cheaper than having everybody travel to Albany or to New York City.
Yeah. As long as it's.
Well, if we can do them in January, that would be better.
Participation, so that the people attending the meeting
Oh,
could participate to the extent
Well,
the public.
as long as you have a laptop with a camera on it.
No, there's more. No, there's more. No, there's more. I'm just trying to do one at a time.
Well, so that's another option,
Here.
Todd. If we,
Start them all on that
we could
side.
set up a video meeting for the purpose of
Yeah,
doing the certification.
Doug, you have to sign all those, so.
Please. I think this is on the way around. No, the seventh is the seventh Senate district and the 100th AD.
That's correct.
And they're both in court?
That's correct.
All right, so you're checking
I
to
like
make
your
sure you
remarks in the
got
newspapers
about,
This is,
about the tight races. You know, now they have lawyers that they pay a lot of money to, and they go to court.
that one missed on those.
Although your brother lawyers may not have appreciated it.
they never do. Want to start another one?
I don't know the date.
You gotta get another one.
I have no idea.
You want to start another one?
He's already got one coming. You could have done one.
Okay. Guess we're gonna go.
No, they all look alike.
Assembly.
It's older, we have
Or Senate.
confused that one. Senate Assembly, we had this special for Congress. Yes.
See, I had the nuns, we used to have to practice all that.
Well, it's new.
We need every letter.
Probably wouldn't work.
We've done it before.
We
but,
finished?
Yes, this is the end of
That's
it.
the
All
last
right.
one.
The last one. You wouldn't even want to steal one.
Oh, we have to return these?
They can keep them.
Plus,
last year, depends what that
That's it.
sign of the times.
All right, so we have certified the election results
pens.
for the statewide offices, for
The November
Supreme
2nd.
Court justices, Congress, State Senate and Assembly, and special election in the 29th Congressional District, with the exceptions of the 100th Assembly District and the Senate
Senate.
District. All right, so motion to adjourn the Board of Canvassers. So moved.
Second.
All right, we adjourned, and now we'll open the meeting for the, commissioners of the State Board of Elections. The first item of business is approval of the minutes of October 21, 2010. So moved. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. Then we'll go to the unit updates. Todd?
Actually, I'm gonna let Bob talk more because it's hard for me to talk.
Okay. It's a professional issue for an attorney not to be able to talk.
Our first blessing of the season.
As Shakespeare said, first we kill all the lawyers. You have to hear the second line of that.
I think briefly, since our last meeting, a majority of our time has been spent with the election certification, post-election, legal issues, and whatever it took to be able to certify the contest today. So, and I think just about everybody in the agency has participated in that in some way or another. Now that stage has ended, we're focusing a little bit on, end-of-year wrap-up and looking forward to next year. The Election Commissioners Association has planned their conference for the end of January, the 25th to the 28th in Rockland County, and have asked the State Board to participate in 3 workshops to talk about test deck procedures. There were some changes that we worked with the city in the primary season to update and to get that information out to everyone. The asset management system, which the contract is still pending with the Comptroller's Office with a number of questions that election operations are preparing responses to their questions that should not be too overly complicated to respond to, but that would move that along. And they've asked us to talk about the 3% audit. Also, they've requested that we get back into our schedule, which we've been doing, like a monthly phone call with them, but between the primary and the general, we had found fewer and fewer participated in the calls because they were busy doing their other work. But our next call with them is this Thursday, and we'll set up that conference call for the executive and the legislative committee members, and then the full membership can listen in. We've also started to work on our touch-up list with the agency for legislative items for bringing to your attention for next year, just from what's on our list that we noticed during the election that we've jotted down, get them all together and perhaps one list, and then keep working from that as to what can we draft and what can we bring to your attention so that you can consider putting them in our packet for next year. Hopefully we'll have something early into 2011 to move that along. The MOVE Act, we had our session with the vendor this past week that provided the service to us, just so we can have a general conversation about, it was an interim implementation to deal with the fact that the law was adopted and we had to do something by the deadline. But we knew it was an interim and we wanted to, put it in place, but also learn from it and prepare for permanent implementation going forward. So last week was a general conversation about the things that we felt worked well and those things that we thought could perhaps see improvement. And towards that end, we have a technical workshop planned tomorrow with each of the county voter registration system vendors who will have to make necessary long-term improvements. And so if they rely on a vendor, that vendor will participate. And if it's a homegrown system, as the case of several of the counties, their IT people have been invited, as well as the commissioners, so that we can, get their perspective on what can we do to make it a permanent program, that will also streamline some of the process that makes their job a little easier and get this done faster than we did in the past.
Can I? Oh, you still have things to report, Brett?
Just a couple. We're still finalizing the survey that's required for the federal voting assistance program. I think there are a couple of counties outstanding from operations is collecting those post-election MOVE Act compliance surveys, and we owe one report to the Department of Justice and one to the federal voting assistance people, basically to see how well the program worked, getting the ballots out and getting them back. So that should be done shortly. Another item, just in general, that's taken a lot of time in the past is the various litigations, and I know it'll be covered. But again, in addition to the work that is on the council's office, I think just about everybody in the agency has been involved in some form or another in one of the litigations in order to deal with, information, education, what's possible with the use of the new voting machines, what do we need to do to respond to the various court cases that are out there. And certainly from an ability to certify the election results, the number of impoundments or, variations of that counting is really taking people quite a bit of time over the last month or so. Those are the general items.
Bob,
You have others?
mention something? I noticed that Senator Addabbo is going to present some legislation concerning Election Day and the ballot and things. You think it would be worthwhile to have our office to talk to his staff to find out exactly, what's going on there? Is that a problem? Yes?
No, there's no problem. We're
No,
always
no.
interested in ideas.
Yeah, I think we should find out, it's been in the papers downstate that he is going to put out some new legislation about Election Day, and I think we should talk to them about that and see if we can be of help. I mean, he's going to go forward with this legislation, and we just want to make sure that the legislature, I think we should make sure that it's really going to help, And in May, I'm sure that he has looked into it every way, but sometimes I think people forget to talk to us. And I think they should, because, we have some experience at what's going on. And I think some of his concerns are with the city board, but it wouldn't hurt for us to at least have a telephone conversation with whoever his staff person is in charge of this, and so we have a better grasp, not just reading out. I don't want to read out of the newspapers or what's supposedly in this legislation. I would rather know for sure. Paul has been raising his hand.
Well, Commissioner, during the last legislative session, Bob and I had any number of discussions with Senator Addabbo's counsel, and we will just continue to do that.
Well, I think that he's evidently formulated some legislation, and I think we should just have a look at it or know what's in it, because people are, sometimes you feel like you're overcome with all the legislation they put out there, and only half of it sometimes is a help in some matters. I don't,
That was generous.
Well, thank you, Greg, thank you. I think that if this is to deal with Election Day, with the new machines, what's going on, I think we should have a knowledge of what's happening, and maybe we can be of help. I think Addabbo has really tried to be very helpful, and I'm happy for that. I mean, we've had some chairmen in the past that didn't even say hello, so this man has really reached out, and I think we should reach back. That's all I'm saying. That's it.
Well, I think from our, not to get into where we've just tried to identify where people have called us, whether it be a county commissioner asking a question or whether it was an observation ourselves, just put them down on a list for now. And then when we sit in the room to try and, do we have the whole list? Certainly we'll hear from others, and more importantly, the county commissioners on the call this week. I mean, they were under the gun to get their, roll out the new equipment, do all the tasks related with certification. Now that everybody's finished that, I'm sure we'll also hear, their input and the input of others as to whether or not, what was the actual experience with the machines and where can we make them better? And I think from all of us, certainly our job is to enfranchise as many people as possible and make it as simple a process as we can. So
Well, I think that we have
More
many
good ideas.
legislators who are going to put out legislation. It's imperative then for us to talk to them, so we don't get laws passed that really don't encompass all of the concerns that we might have, or some things in laws that are unnecessary. I think we have to, take a role in that. All right.
That's never happened.
I know, I'm trying to start something new.
All right, anything else?
No, I don't.
But you will do that, both of you.
All right, then we'll go for the legal report. Kim Galvin?
Thank you, Commissioner. We continue to do our weekly calls with the Department of Justice, bi-weekly calls with the Department of Justice and the AG's office, although, those reports, weekly status reports haven't changed much, obviously, because we haven't had much to change with them, if Brian Heffernan is watching. We work with the Sound Council, primarily Paul has, that are representing us on the outstanding litigation, particularly the overvote or the double vote and the non-issues. We've represented the board and any impounds that we are a party to, or we've monitored the activity in the various impound orders across the state, trying to notify the counties as quickly as possible with the operations unit as to any changes on the coverage of the impounds. There was quite a few of them, and it got to be confusing because they would come in and some parts would be lifted and some parts would be in place, and then there would be competing local impound orders. So we did our best to work with the county commissioners to keep those straight for them. We did work, wherever Bob just went, we worked with initially to start the legislative package, keeping in mind all the things that Bob put forth, and also, if you recall, the latest consent decree that we entered in with the Department of Justice, one of the provisions there said that we would pursue or explore any avenues that would help to keep New York State in compliance moving further so that we don't repeatedly need waivers. So part of that package is putting forth some of those ideas that may seem a little bit out of the ordinary to some people. That's the basic unit, other than the obvious calls and working with the other units on the routine business. And then Paul has some things to add regarding the specific activities and some of the cases that he's been handling. So.
The Nassau County challenge to Irma has been transferred to Albany County, and that's the status of it. There has been no activity in it. I went down to New York and participated in a discovery conference over the Brennan Center's litigation on the overvote warning message. As you know, the Attorney General is actually representing the agency in that proceeding because it's done in the city. With respect to a couple of the cases in the Northern District, there was a case brought by a voter in 2007 who takes the view that the use of any voting machine, lever machine or electronic voting, violates his constitutional right to have a process that's completely transparent. We moved to dismiss that case based on standing issues because there's some good law out of the Third Circuit in that regard. We also had a case brought by someone who ran for United States Senate here in New York, and we've moved to dismiss that on standing as well. He seeks to challenge the New York State ban on out-of-state petition gatherers and also the closed primary system. So we've moved in the Northern District to dismiss that. I attended last week a status conference on the DOJ's NVRA case against the community colleges in SUNY CUNY. And there's a real effort on the part of all of those folks involved in that case to move the thing along and to comply. And it was a very good conference, and it's moving. The Department of Justice was granted summary judgment, and now you're into the enforcement aspect of it. But the people from SUNY are really trying to comply, so that's good news. because we're looking to register people. And that's about it, other than the normal calls we get from the county commissioners with their questions, which are a pleasure to answer. That's what we get paid for.
All right, thank you, Kim and Paul. If there are no questions, we'll move to election operations. Dennis Fitzgerald.
Well, we've been a little busy with county board support, ballot issues, voter issues, et cetera. I think for the most part, we're very pleased with the way that things went with the voting systems. They are working as they should. Our issues are, for the most part, people-oriented. We have overly helpful, excuse me, election inspectors. We have poll sites that perhaps are not conducive to the new array of equipment that needs to be positioned in those poll sites, that don't afford as much privacy as voters might want by way of path of travel around privacy booths and access to the scanner, et cetera. So we'll be listening to the county boards with their feedback on those issues, but also reinforcing our training components with them and asking them to reinforce those issues with their teams of inspectors so that we can move a little bit more in the direction that some voters would like to see. But clearly there is a learning curve on the voters' part too. There is no longer that monster voting curtain around them when they vote. We need to afford them every other variety of privacy and confidentiality that we can, given the poll sites that the counties may have available to them. Apart from that, we are collecting information on the audits from the county boards. When we have had a couple of reports indicating that their audit needed to be escalated, our research into those particular issues indicated that it's a hand counting issue. People's eyes don't pick up what a voting machine picks up. So those, again, were people issues, but the audit teams and the county boards did follow the procedures that we had laid out for them. We're expecting a lot of feedback on this issue at the January conference, and we'll be reviewing the forms that we invented for this process to make sure that they are as friendly as we thought they were when we invented them, and make sure that they serve the purpose for which they're intended. We did visit some boards while they were conducting their audits, so we have our own firsthand information. We'll be incorporating those into a report that we'll provide to the board. We did monitor poll sites in county boards of elections on election day. That report is being aggregated right now, and we'll have that for you. Before the next board meeting, we'll make it available to you and then present it formally at the board meeting so that we can post it to our website. We will be reviewing all of our procedures as they relate to election operations. In particular, it's the close of polls that perhaps isn't working the way the inspectors might best see it work. And election night returns are an issue as well, with boards getting those numbers later than the general public would like to see them, and whether or not boards are still using phone calls for getting those numbers, which means there will be errors, they're human errors, or they're working out better ways to get the memory devices back from those scanners and read them so that we at least eliminate the human error from that particular aspect of election reporting. We will also be able to, as was alluded to by the co-directors, get into the ballot usability, the legislation that might need to be modified to better accommodate these voting systems, and a number of other associated issues. But hopefully we'll have this part of the process behind us, and it'll be reporting and give us a chance to get to some of those other topics that eluded us as we work through this election. Joe, do you have anything?
Bob and I and a gentleman from the governor's office, Jeff Perlman, were going around and we saw some things, mostly that we saw human error, but there are some things that are a little bit of concern, and one of them was the layout of the actual woods that we went to, the school that we went to, or wherever, in that neighborhood. And there were places where things were not placed in the best position. You could walk by maybe and read somebody's ballot when they were voting, and that disturbed us. That was a concern. In one case, I think in Queens, where I think Senator Schumer had just been there and had concerns. And some of the watchers were brazen enough to pick spots to stand so they could watch somebody, how they voted. And I don't know what we do about that. If there's someone who helps them, how do you set up your polling place? How do you do this so everything is private? 99% of them were good, as always. But, there's always that one that isn't, and that's the one that concerns you. I would say most places there were lines, which is a concern. It gets long lines, and the people were working very, very hard to, facilitate everything. They still weren't 100% sure of themselves, and of course that concern that we all have about the printing of the ballot being on the small side. But it was the privacy booth, or when they went to put their ballot in to be counted, that there were two gentlemen in this Queen's Place that stood against the wall just so they could look at how people were voting. I think they were watchers. I would have thrown them out. But we did ask them. I think Bob, did you go over to them, Bob, and ask them to move? Somebody did. Maybe it was Perlman. Ask them to move. You don't?
We spoke nicely to the police officer who was there, and to the chairwoman who was trying to maintain the order. That was a site that had 3 machines, and 2, the technician was there to clear them, so she was trying to maintain order to keep people flowing to the 1 machine and the technicians to repair the 2 machines, and I think the watchers,
2 machines in
I'll
trouble.
give the benefit of the doubt, were more concerned with what was causing the 2 machines not to work as opposed to the one that was working, but we did suggest that they come up with a better way that everybody can view what's happening and give the voters enough privacy, and they did move those people along and
They did.
gave them a better place to stand.
But they with 2 machines down for whatever reason, and I must say I have to say New York City was on the job because they had 2 mechanics there taking care of them right away. And most of them I think that bothered me the most in all the schools we went to, but not every school, but there was some that was situated perfectly. Everything was in the right spot in the auditorium or wherever it was, the gym, but some weren't. And I don't know what we do about that, because you want things, suddenly one long line connects with another long line and nobody knows which line they're on. And I think we have to look into some of these things. I don't know how. I don't know if we have the right to stick ourselves in that business, but at least maybe it's something at our conference we could address. The makeup, and they don't do it. The boards don't do it. Let's face it goes out to the local community, the makeup of the polling place. But maybe we could, between the local boards and us, we could give them a design, how the ideal polling place should be laid out. And I know every room is different. I mean, I understand that. But get it as close as you can to this design or something, or a couple of designs. I don't know. It's easy for me to say, to give other people work. But I would like to see a more smoothly operating polling place. And I think, and somewhat ideal. And I think somehow we have to look into that, because when you walk into one and you see it's mishmash, it doesn't give you a great desire to want to vote. And it doesn't look good. And most of the people there, as I say, they're doing their best. They're absolutely doing their best. But you could walk behind where they put in their ballot and see in some places. And we don't want that to happen. Thank you.
Anna, could you explain the issue that arose in Erie County concerning the inability of the EMS to read the memory cards?
I would ask Bob Warren to do that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, in Erie County, they've had a problem where they had to do an update in the EMS system to recognize the memory stick. So they had to contact the vendor and sent the vendor information on it. The vendor sent them back the code that they would have to enter into the EMS system so that it would recognize those memory sticks. Because they had found an error that was within the EMS system.
Let's go back. The genesis of the error was that there was a last-minute ballot programming change.
Well, I think it was more than one last-minute change. I think they had made different changes over time, and they were merging the information over and over from one module to the other. And the vendor found that there was an error when you did that over time with the amount of information that they had. So it wasn't updating the code for the memory stick to be read back in. So the vendor looked into it, told them what the code was on the stick that had to be entered into the EMS system. They entered it into the EMS system, and then it recognized the sticks to be read back in.
The election day software was not affected at all. When
No.
these changes are made, those changes travel on two paths, one to the election day memory devices, one into the election reporting system. The election reporting system is where that path broke down. So the change that they had to make did not affect any ballots, readability of ballots, or the memory sticks themselves. Only when those election results were imported, they would be read incorrectly. So the change was made in the election reporting module, which is a product that they can or can't use. It's not required, but clearly in a county that size, it would be helpful to have that corrected. So the vendor has made that software change. It is part of the remaining findings that we'll be testing again after the first of the year. Pardon me?
That wasn't am I right to think that was not an insignificant problem?
No, but it was not an election day. It did not affect voting. It did not affect anybody's ability to mark a ballot and have it read correctly. It only affected the board's ability to aggregate those results at the end of the night. Huge nonetheless, but election day would have been worse.
Oh, yes.
Because there's 3 memory sticks created at the start of burning the media. One is for the scanner to recognize the poll stick that goes in. The other is the poll stick, and the third one is for the reporting module, so that it knows to read all the information back in. And the code that was on the reporting module is no longer recognized by the ERM system that reads in the memory stick. So they had to update that so that it would recognize its ERM stick, then they could read in the poll sticks.
Let's hope that don't happen again.
And how do you know that the vote counts that were reported from the memory stick are an accurate reflection of the votes that were actually cast on that machine?
Well, what they did was after they read in the memory sticks into the ERM system.
And is the they the
The
vendor,
board, Erie
or
County
is it-
Board, when Erie County Board read those memory sticks into their EMS system, they then took the same stick and they put it into another machine and printed another tape from that machine so that a comparison could be made between the election day tape and the tape that was printed on that day, along with the report from the EMS system. So they had 3 sources to verify to ensure that the totals were all the same.
And they did that with candidates present, with all of the attorneys present, because there were some close contests in that, particularly in the Senate. So we made sure that the county board made sure that they didn't do any work that was, closeted in any way, if you'll excuse the term.
Now, were there any other programming issues that came up anywhere in the state for the general election?
Not that I'm aware of. There were a few issues initially where they didn't handle their cross endorsements correctly, but they were picked up during the test deck testing. So they were all adjusted prior to burning the media for the election.
Good, so we're getting there, we're making
Yeah.
progress.
Thank you, Bob.
The test decking is, the more we address the issues of test decking and reinforce how critical it is that it be thorough and robust, that's how the errors can be found in the ballot configuration that the county boards are doing. And we made our staff available. We did on-site visits if they needed that assistance. We felt very confident that the boards understood that we were a tool here to help them and that they used us in that regard. We're happy to be used in that regard.
Did we learn anything from the Erie County incident that would be useful for other counties or other states that use that system?
Not really for that one particular issue, because it was a software problem, which we're going to see that it's fixed and we'll be testing it.
Well, what do you mean when you say it's a software problem? It's not just a formatting or ballot programming issue?
No, this was an actual issue within the software, within the code of the software, that it wasn't updating that code on that reporting stick when it should have. So
It's more of an index than,
Yeah.
it's an index code, so that the stick knows that the information, that the receiving election management system knows that, you know, the candidate in that position is the same from stick to stick. So it indexes the candidates from the stick that collects the election results to make sure it's the same index for the stick for reporting at the end of the night. And it's, you know, just as one of those Excel files, if you change the order of the candidates, you're going to get, you know, you'll have the numbers, but they're going into the wrong slot. So they put a code in to make sure that they both, you know, here's the order that the candidates are coming in, and they check the index to make sure that it's you know, doing oranges to oranges or apples to apples and not mixing them up. And when it created the file, it correctly created the file for the index as proved by the testing, but it didn't automatically update the reporting module stick because, as we've heard, so many last-minute changes. There wasn't one last-minute change in Erie County between the number of changes in the governor's contest and in the statewide contest because of somebody declining and somebody substituting, but also local issues with regard to propositions that were late changes. And they made so many late changes that whatever the issue was did not properly update that stick. So one, the vendors claimed they had a fix in as part of our follow-up submission that they're making that we have to test. But it's not a closed issue because we don't want it to repeat itself. We want to make sure that it's fixed. We think it's in the fix, we think it'll work, but we won't know until they submit it and we finish testing it. But it certainly is something that, you know, affected the ability to get the results, but between the tape.
To aggregate the results.
To aggregate the results, but anybody could look at the tape, and the tape was clearly available to all of the attorneys because we all read about it in the paper every night. So everybody had the raw data, so whether or not they used this system to aggregate the results or added them on their own piece of paper or made their own Excel spreadsheet, they all could have aggregated the results and came to the same conclusion as to what the numbers were. It's just when the system works, it happens faster, and people have more reliable numbers on it, you know, as fast as they can. So fixing it is on our list.
I have two more questions on this subject. Is anybody looking at the ballot images that are recorded that you know of?
At the county level,
Or anyone at all?
I don't know at the county level if they are or not.
And does anybody look at the ballot images when there are audit issues? Or have there been so few audit issues that just hasn't come up?
I think they've all been able to account for their issues after they go through the ballots a number of times, so that they can get the count. They recognize their problems over time that makes the audit come out correctly, where they have their hand counts incorrect. And I don't think anyone is going back to the ballots to look for that. Because it would be difficult because, you know, they're not tied to anything, so you'd have to look at all these images and try to figure out which one is which.
Well, except that if they're trying to reconcile the audit by looking for ambiguous marks, the watermarks on the ballot images would definitively resolve that, right? Because
Yes, they
the
would.
watermarks tell you how the machine actually counted any given ballot.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
I don't think anyone went to that step.
You know, I just repeat my view that we should make the ballot, and we should be encouraging people to make the ballot images open, available for those who do want to look at it, so that they can see how the machines are functioning, and that there should be, in my view, there should be more use of the ballot images, because that is one of the major features that distinguishes this system as the next generation of scanners from those scanners that don't record ballot images.
And they're all there and available, so they can utilize.
Okay. And then my last question or comment is on the Justice Warshawski's decision in the 7th Senate District suggested that there were issues concerning the how Nassau County was actually conducting the canvass and recanvass. And I guess in my asking around, I have that the state board hasn't been involved in that contest, and at this point, we don't really know the answers to those issues. Is that the consensus here?
Well, I think the transcript version that we saw first wasn't as clear as perhaps the written decision that came second, which gave a little bit more information that some of the ballot accountability steps took place, but there's still a difference of opinion between the two commissioners, I believe, not mention the candidates, as to the audit issues, and they're still appealing them. So, certainly we want to make sure that the audit was accurate and that they had taken the steps that they counted, and if they identified issues that we need to look at, they and other counties during the audit, that we make sure that we, if our regulations are unclear, that we make them clearer. If we've missed something, we make something clear. If people head down a different path because they don't understand our regulations, we want to make sure that it's clear to everyone, what is required under the statute, and that we review any of the findings. One of the items that I myself scratched my head when I read the regs is we never really put a provision in there when the two commissioners don't agree as to what you do next, which is a valid issue that we have to at least consider, but right now it's in court, so we at least have to wait till Thursday of this week and figure out if there's any more, if it's unclear to the court, we'll know that in their decision, but I think we wait for the appeals to happen and follow up with them afterwards.
Well, good, Anna?
I was just going to say, it's very hard to use a hundreds-year-old footprint and then put this kind of voting system into it. The election districts, multiple EDs served by less than that number of scanners, and try to do ballot reconciliation in 10 EDs, aggregate that so that 3 scanner teams would know what happened, and then somehow get a polling place figure out of that site. So I think some of the issues that we've talked about in how our poll sites are structured, how election districts are built, et cetera, might warrant some conversation, certainly not a change without having a lot of conversation on the topic. But that process is daunting. It's not easy for those separate election districts to reconcile those ballots. There's a lot of math. It's been a long day. And then you have to aggregate those numbers somehow so that they make sense for the several scanners that serve those multiple election districts. There's a lot of new ground here that we have not had a chance to get into, but we've been kind of chomping at the bit. And here, I think, is perhaps the entree for that. So
Right.
looking
Yes.
forward to that.
Certainly, we have been talking about abolishing the use of election districts and just going to poll sites, at least for the purpose of canvassing votes.
So I think from our procedure, and we talked briefly, it probably wouldn't hurt us to do a workshop in time for our conference on clearly, what the requirements are for the close of polls different under the paper-based system. Some of these concepts aren't different from when you had a lever machine to account for the number of voters and if there were any affidavits or emergency ballots. The concepts are the same, but the steps are different. And I think we've seen from some of the counties, what do I do now? They've changed the system. Or even on the recanvass. What is the recanvass? We had a lot of, in all of these litigations, when they get the judge to order what day we could now we can agree to do the recanvass. The question was, okay, now what is the recanvass anymore? So probably not as, from a higher level, because every county does their steps a little bit differently, but what do you have to accomplish during the election night close from a ballot accountability and during the recanvass to just prove it? If they had the list of items that they have to prove, each county's going to kind of go through some of those steps a little differently, but I think they're confused about what they had to prove in each step.
And in my view, in reading Justice Warshawski's decision, it left open the questions of whether the re-canvass had been done in accordance with the regulations. But after the litigation is done, I think we do need to investigate the facts there and follow up, not just with Nassau, but with everyone, to make sure that that the boards are doing a proper re-canvass the way the statute contemplates.
And if they want us to explain, if they want more information, or they feel we're not clearly presenting the information to them, because that happens sometimes. People will say, "Will you give us the information, but I really don't know what you mean." I think we have to look at that too. This has been a first for all of us, and Nassau generally knows what they're doing, and I know that there were tensions there and everything, but still, I think we have to see what can we do that will make this easier. Is there something, and Anna, you have done Superwoman's job. Nobody could have done what you did. I congratulate you. But it was a brand new system for a lot of people, and I think there's bound to be questions of how can we do it better and more accurately. And I think at our conference we can begin, and it's not going to end at the conference, we can begin to ask those questions and have those questions asked of us.
Our Election 101 issues aren't the same anymore, so clearly
No, they're not.
the closing polls, re-canvass, the audit, and the ballot reconciliation were the ones where our boards had the most questions and the trip-ups might have manifested themselves. So those are the four that we need to focus on, I think, moving
I
forward.
agree with you.
In addition to whatever else the county boards choose to raise when we're together in January, I'm sure they're all going to have comments for us.
Well, I think Commissioner Kilmer saying we could take the EDs away. I would be very careful about doing that. I would go kind of slowly because enough change, change can't come all in one decade. No, I can agree that they're not needed that much anymore. But we're seeing it only from one side. Maybe other people feel more comfortable. You vote with your community. Your community might be your election district, and you might be comfortable. Oh, there's people from across the street or down, the next block, and I feel comfortable seeing them. And so I would go a little slow with taking the EDs away, but I do see the benefit of it. But not too much change all at once.
Well, the other
Us
issue,
old folk can't take it, Doug.
the other issue that it's not too early for the counties to be paying attention to is the state regulation on waiting time. And as they prepare for the presidential election that's 2 years from now, that certainly
I've waited plenty of
the
time. Go ahead.
counties and urban areas need to pay attention to how they're going to staff their polls to meet the board regulations so that lines aren't longer than half an
I
hour.
agree with you.
We have a primary in less than a year and a few months, so presidential
Well-
primary petitions come out in the fall of 2011.
But it's
so-
specifically the presidential general election
Right,
where the
right,
counties
right.
have to pay attention now that just staffing them the way they've done historically is going to create long lines and would put them in violation of the regulations.
Anything that we think up would be good to be thought of now, because at least we could try it in the 2011 elections and in the primary and not have that, again, full-blown implementation in a monster election like the presidential.
Unfortunately, it's hard to see, does the line move that fast unless you have a long, long line and you see it move faster.
All right, well, thank you. So we'll turn to public information. John Conklin.
Thank you, Commissioner. Well, as all the things that have been talked about at this table is all the kind of questions and answers that the PIO has had to give out in the wake of the election. Lots of media inquiries, email questions. When you come away from election night and you still have 6 assembly seats, 3 Senate seats, 2 congressional districts that are still too close to call, there's a lot of questions that get answered. So we've certainly had to deal with a lot of that. And every part of the agency has helped us answer all those questions, so thank you. We appreciate that very much. We posted the transcript for the October board meeting. We're starting our preparations for the annual conference for the state board in April. We posted Anna's primary report from the election operations unit. For NVRA, we're working on the draft changes to the voter registration form. We have to add one additional party to the voter form. The Green Party is now an official party. And we have to change the order of the parties on the form because they've been adjusted as a result of the election. As Paul mentioned, the meeting with the State University, DOJ, and the AG, the MVRA unit attended that as well. A couple of questions were directed at us, but overwhelmingly I think it was issues of compliance with SUNY and DOJ. And the PIO generally has attended and participated on all the MOVE Act discussions as well. So that's all I have.
Any questions? Thank you, John.
You're welcome.
Campaign finance, Elizabeth Hogan.
Thank you, Commissioner. In keeping with the format that I've tried to use in the written report for the past number of months, I tried to give you the statistics for the month of November and the cumulative statistics for the year. And as you can see from the review, the statistics are quite high. We have 11,600 registered committees and candidates. We have responded with the staff that we have to over 14,000 inquiries by telephone. So I tried to give you a general idea by putting that information in the written report. As well, we've been very busy this year, especially because the primaries and the general election have added 6 filings to the year. And with the 6 filings, it has certainly increased the staff workload and the number of lawsuits that we bring and all the steps that are part of that. I tried to give you some idea as to the status of what is happening with the different reports and the lawsuits. From the perspective of the audit staff, this being the very end of the year, they've spent the year looking at audits relative to the year 2009, and for the most part, those audits are complete, and the audit staff is at this point wrapping up issues because they're not going to be able to start the next audits for the year 2010 until subsequent to the filing of the January periodic and perhaps even the order to show cause for failure to file that report. So we're trying to work on small things in the audit unit to clean up some matters. As well, that staff is working with the training staff and with George's folks to try to talk and develop the software, the new software. And that's a long-term project. It isn't, it's not something that gets from month to month of meeting here that I can tell you we've made X amount of progress on, because it's a very large project and there are a lot of parts that integrate with each other. But there's an active and continuing work on the part of George's people and our own on that issue. As well, the other large issue that we're looking at is the reworking of the campaign finance section of the website to make it more usable for people. And we've had a lot of input from staff as to what kind of telephone calls they get and what might be the most appropriate way to present the campaign finance website to catch the attention of the people who are looking for those answers. So, Bill, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Nope, that's
Okay.
fine.
I mean, that's pretty much what we're doing in campaign finance.
Thank you. George Stanton, information technology.
All of the above. We're sort of, like I've told you lots of times, I view IT as a service organization for the rest of the agency. So we basically, take care of everything on a monthly basis that everybody needs from us, as far as the website. And we've obviously finished processing all of the campaign financial reports for the year, of which there were a lot. Moving into a slower time period now, we're getting ready to do some major maintenance on the Nysboe system in the week between Christmas and New Year's, because it'll be very slow and very lightly used at that time, so we're going to shut it down for a few days, do some heavy-duty maintenance on the hardware and software to get that tuned up for the next year. Other than that, you've got my extensive report, which is a lot of jargon, but if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer.
Well, I'm going to ask again, is New York City still refusing to cooperate?
I don't know as I'd say they're refusing to cooperate, because I don't know if anybody's been asking them on a daily basis to cooperate.
Well, I was brought up, at least by the television, somebody voted in Suffolk County, who also voted in New York City, and the television announcers said, we're just like Chicago, get up and vote early and often. And it was one person they were talking about. I think that's a little...
Well, I think there's conversations beginning with New York City again about being more compliant, but Bob and Todd are better able to talk to that than I am right now. So.
I mean, we have to. I would just wish there was a way we could solve that, and we could have us statewide, be able to do this statewide so these things wouldn't happen. And we have to sort them out.
There's a lot of counties out there surrounding New York City that would share that thought.
But I think we shouldn't just say, well, it's a done deal, there's nothing we can do about it. I think we have an obligation to try to find a solution to that and get that done, George. I don't know if the other commissioners agree.
Todd and Bob, is there something in the works to get the next round of correspondence moving with New York City?
Or meetings, whatever.
Well, I think we both have heard from people at the city board, again, about a willingness to have a conversation.
They came to us.
And, I think we reminded them, the last face-to-face meeting we had on this subject was quite some time ago, and there were some issues at the city level because the staff that attended the meeting on behalf of the city were not authorized to have as full a conversation as we were willing to have. And they needed to go back and get permission to actually talk to us about what needed to be done. But I think at that meeting, it was in Brooklyn, and I know George and Bob Smith had some technical ideas of ways, and Bill was there. I thought that was a very productive meeting, and they had several ideas on the table that would really allow us to get beyond some of the issues. We were waiting for the city to respond to us in a way that, one, their staff could have a meaningful conversation, and two,
Bob, we can't wait. We can't wait,
We've followed up with them on a number of times, but they were not willing to respond to us. But now they've contacted us, so we thought that was very positive. We brought them up to date on where we thought we left off, because there have been staff changes there at the senior management.
I know.
And we both Todd and I relayed the information to them and offered our, as soon as they want to pick up where we left off with a hope that we can solve the issue.
Well, I would get their top people. Either we go down there or they come up here. And, with some pressures that are on them, and I don't know if all those pressures are fair, maybe we can finally, take the step and get this done. I just think we shouldn't just let it, we'll see them in a couple of months, and we told them what to do. If they, they've called us, it looks like they want to work it out, and I would reach out and set up the meeting either. And you and Todd go down, or they come up, or whatever. We'll give them coffee and buns, whatever it takes.
I know we both offered.
But it is the federal law.
A meeting here or a meeting there.
Right.
I know some of them are away a little bit now after the election.
I'm not saying before Christmas, but it's the federal law, and I think we should do everything in our power. I think the other commissioners agree and get this done, especially when a lot of other big counties have cooperated. And I know they're tough. They've got 5 counties within one city, and it's not easy, and they don't have a lot of staff or a lot of money, but I think we can begin to have some progress with that.
I agree.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else?
I shouldn't have had decaf coffee sometime. I mean, non-decaf coffee coming up.
You're doing great.
Sorry.
All right, so we take up the first item of old business, which is the resolutions to determine Dominion and ES&S claims that certain records are trade secrets pursuant to Public Officers Law, Section 89, Subdivision 5B. Paul?
There are two resolutions, one for each vendor. However, in looking at the one that's in my packet, for reasons that I don't quite comprehend on the,
Theirs is correct.
theirs is correct, okay, they've got, and what has happened
2 and 3.
is we have asked Nystek, our consultant, to review their claims of confidentiality. Nystek has provided an item-by-item report, and it's the recommendation of staff that we accept that recommendation and determine that those items which the vendors have sought protection for, which Nystek does not feel to be either a trade secret or would put the vendors in a commercially disadvantaged position, that we ought not to give them that protection. Now, that doesn't mean that it's over, because the vendors have the right under the statute to bring an Article 78 against the agency to contest our decision that they're not entitled to trade secret or commercial sensitivity protection for all of the information that they filed.
All right, well, thank you for getting this done, Paul. I know this has been in the works now for almost 2 years. And just to clarify, it's the third column, wherever Nystek says yes, we are ruling that the document will be publicly available.
That's my understanding.
And that where Nystek says security-related or source code-related, that we are going to sustain the vendor's claim of confidentiality.
That is correct.
And that immediately after we adopt this resolution, you and Kim will take steps to formally notify the vendors that we made this determination, so that the provisions of the Freedom of Information Law, Section 89, are triggered.
That is correct, and their time to challenge it would commence to run.
All right, great. Well, thank you. I'm very pleased that
It's a lot of work,
we've
yeah.
gotten this accomplished.
To Kim and Paul.
Is there a second for the resolution? Those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, so both resolutions are adopted. Next item on old business is discussion of ballot usability, which I've been continuing because I just think this is important, that we should be talking about it every month. And there are two issues on this. One, we spoke briefly during the legal report about revising the screens on notifying voters of overvotes. And could we have an update on what's happening in terms of doing those revisions that we said in February we were going to start to do?
Well, as we talked in February, we were hoping to get some input from also the experience of this election, if there are other notices that the counties have identified to us. We've had a preliminary meeting just to kind of discuss what an improvement, if there was an edit to the page, what could it look like that would be clearer to voters, as we discussed in February last year. One, I think we haven't quite heard from all the counties yet as to any notice issues that they may have thought that, was it understandable, was it not. Certainly any improvement, we would want it to improve something and not cause more confusion. But those are still at a preliminary stage. I think we hopefully can complete those both for the Dominion system and the ES&S system. That would, I think many of our terminology, we use overvote, maybe county, a voter on election day doesn't know what the word means. So is there a way of changing the wording in a way that would be clearer to people? I think we've talked about them. I don't know that we have a specific plan yet, but I think we're getting closer, and we hopefully could have one, depending on what the January meeting looks like, and what between now and then, we should be pretty close to having one for you at the January meeting, if
When you
not.
say plan, you mean an actual proposal for the
A proposal for
commissioners.
what the words would look like. And from our talking, we would like, what do we think would be helpful? A little bit of input from the counties to make sure that they don't have other notice issues that we haven't even considered yet because they haven't brought them to our attention. If we're going to do it, let's make sure we accomplish. People who have experience with the Dominion and the ES&S system, if any other notice is unclear. And also sit down with the two vendors to make sure that if we think this is a good idea, that it isn't, something, that there won't be some other trigger effect that we haven't thought about, that at least we should get their input before we give you the plan. And I think relatively, we should be able to have that for you in January.
And I understand that the staff is working on finding out exactly what notices are being used in the other jurisdictions that use the DS-200.
We've looked at some, and I know some have some wording that, some people like a little bit, the concepts, but, the functionality that a voter independently learns on our DS2 system, DS-200 system requirements, where the system independently will identify for that voter which contests, and if it's more than one, all of the contests that the voter has overvoted. Some of the other notices aren't clear, the people have shared with us, how that communication takes place. So one, I think we want to reach out to those states. Maybe they just gave us a bad example, and it didn't make sense, but certainly you wouldn't want it to tell you you've overvoted in this contest, you go back and fix it and come back and find out you made the same mistake in another contest. We will, that would be very frustrating to a voter. And some of the screens that people have shared over the last couple of months aren't really clear that it gives you all the information that our screen gives you. Maybe the top wording needs to be better, maybe the ending wording, but that functionality I think is very important to communicate independently to the voter, because once they leave that voting machine, if they have to ask an inspector, that's a verbal conversation with a ballot out in the middle of a polling site, and it's not a confidential, private situation. So I think we can, take the best of both worlds. Ours is not fully broken, and theirs is not as good as some of the functionality of ours.
And the other issue we need to look at is whether or not to just reject the ballot when it's to reject the ballot automatically when it's overvoted. At least in the litigation, the plaintiffs there are asking that be the relief, and it would be helpful to find out what other states are actually doing that, and to weigh the pros and cons. All right, so that's one issue. The other one is this issue on how we lay out the ballots, the typeface sizes, the formatting of the ballot, and whether we continue having this difference where New York City is using the horizontal ballot and everybody else is using New York City is using a horizontal for the parties, and everybody else puts the parties on the vertical axis.
Don't we have to have it more things?
There is a better way to make more use of the limited real estate that's on that ballot, and the format is not in an AVM style. The format is in that vertical kind of layout. Not quite a New York City layout, but something along those lines is what we have seen with some of the samples that have been shared with us. Even the vendors have contributed to some of that conversation, but it is something that we need to get into.
You have been gathering
Yes.
Examples of what other states are doing.
Yes.
And have you assigned anybody on your staff to become a usability expert, to get usability training?
No, we have not done that.
Well, I don't know how the other commissioners feel, but this is something where I think strongly that Anna should now that certification is winding down, that Anna should take one person on her staff, and that person should be told, you are going to be the usability person, even if it means formally changing the job description, and provide training for that person so that we have somebody on staff who can begin to acquire expertise on this. It strikes me that at least somebody in the state should be trained in how to put together a ballot in the most usable format.
I just want to ask 2 questions about that, because I agree with you.
All right, and I guess, Anna, I would ask that this be something you address specifically at the next meeting. I don't want to just ram it down you, although
Well, I want to
we've
ask
asked
a
about this
Let me ask a
before.
question first, Anna.
Yes.
Do you have a person that you can spare at this moment to pull out of what they're doing and give them this new job? I mean, we got to be practical here.
Well, of course we don't, but, and I'm just saying that we have to start to prioritize, and that
I think we should have.
as certification. I remember 2 or 3 years ago, I insisted that Anna assign her staff people to learn how the machines worked, and that and there was a lot of resistance. As I recall, it took months for them to go through the manuals and actually learn the machines. But then when we came to the certification votes in January of 2008, was it 2000? Well, whenever we went through that first round of certification voting, it was critical that we had people on our staff who actually knew all the nuts and bolts. And I think that as the state agency responsible for the ballots, and for giving assistance to the counties on this subject, that we need to have at least one person who's gone to the professional training programs that are available to understand the issues that need to be addressed in properly formatting a ballot.
Yeah, I agree with you, but I'm concerned about her staff. Can it do another job? Does it have the ability to take on? This is a big thing, and certainly our budget is already in trouble.
We are up for it.
And speak the truth. If you can do it easily, fine.
I mean, it's certainly not my unit, but we do understand, all of us, that it's a huge undertaking and that whoever is assigned as the point person will need complete and total participation by every level and input. And, clearly one person might not have the county board experience or the expertise that will be required or come to bear. And there's been a lot of discussions about, assigning a person in the agency, certainly not to take away Anna's authority to do so, but I know that person will need buy-in from both sides, all levels. So it is a huge undertaking.
Big job, I know it's not a little thing. And
We all
I'm
have
concerned.
recognized that.
If someone is assigned to it, I want them to be able to do it correctly.
I agree.
And that's
But
my
I think at
concern.
this point, we need to take people who have been assigned to certification, at least one person,
No, I totally agree.
and
We
say.
need the person.
And we know how it gets when too many people are assigned. I think it needs to be a
No.
very tight focus group.
That there needs to be a usability expert.
I agree.
And I don't think it's realistic that we can go to and ask for an additional position. I mean, ideally, the way government used to work is we'd say, all right, we need a usability expert, give us another budget line for it. It's not gonna happen, so.
I think we've learned it's helpful to have two, because for whatever crisis we have, it isn't a single crisis. There's usually some overlapping other item that we also have to manage at the same time, so if we
Or
had
someone
two.
gets sick or
Or if we had two, but I know Anna, in her unit, I think we identify them and we'll, work with those existing organizations that
I
do this
really
kind of work.
will,
And
yeah.
it might not be as expert as others in the outside world, but once they develop a working understanding and the source, as I think we've worked over the years with full site accessibility, we've become more experts. Certainly we are not experts, but we have learned that we have a reliable organization in the Commission on Quality of Care, so we know where to go to get the answers. So I think as an agency, once we learn enough to become more proficient at it, we'll also learn who are the people that we can have as a sounding board that we might be able to ask the tough questions.
Right. All right, well,
I support it.
we'll continue this so that it appears on the agenda again next meeting.
We'll have a plan of some sort to present to you at the next meeting.
And, you know, I would urge you to continue gathering as many sample ballots as you can from all around the world. And then to look at the staffing so that we actually have somebody who's doing this on a professional basis and not just the way we've been doing it in the past. All right, so we have 2 items of new business. First is the resolution authorizing funding for the alternative dispute resolution services. That's been passed out in our packets. Is there any discussion on that? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the next is to continue the Nysboe Storage Area Network Service Contract. Again, I think we've had that in advance, and if there's no discussion, we'll take a vote. All right, those in favor of the resolution to continue the Nysboe Storage Area Network Service, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Enforcement cases, does anybody want to have a discussion on them in executive session?
Commissioner, can I just, Bill had a discussion with me subsequent to our meeting, and there was one complaint that I think there was an issue with some wording changes. We could either table it.
Which number is it?
It's 09-141.
We could table it till the next meeting if,
Well,
09-141.
As long as we don't talk about the spec, yeah, just what do you want to do with it?
All right, so we can lay that one over. And you both agree that you want to lay it over?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
All right. All right,
It's on the
so,
bottom there.
It's always the last one I look at.
all right, so other than that one, so that's 09-141 that's being taken out of the list. All the others, we're moving the adoption of the preliminary determinations, and those not requiring preliminary determinations as reported by the Campaign and Finance Enforcement Unit. All right, those in favor of adopting the Campaign Finance Unit's proposal, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, so that's done. Have you discussed when you want to meet next? Second week of January?
A lot of people are going away. No, not me. I could have gone to Captiva, but I said no.
Nice try.
So,
What's the second week in June?
actually, the third week is better for me, but,
Let's do the calendar.
When's the holiday? When's the holiday?
Martin Luther King Day is the 17th.
Okay.
17?
The conference is the next.
Every day but the 19th, but it has to be, I'll make myself acceptable to that. I have an assistant.
So do you want to do it before the holiday?
Whatever you want.
Or is that week back?
Martin Luther King